Good morning. Well, you're seeing me again, beardless this time. Yeah, I got into a fight with my weed eater this week, so the beard came off for a little bit, at least for a couple of weeks before I start growing it back. But we are going to be. We had some other technical issues, like we did last week, where the recording cut off in the middle of it. So I'm just going to re-record the whole thing, and we'll get started. Let me go ahead and share our screen today. There we go, and go to full screen here. Okay, today we're going to start in Isaiah chapter 8. It says, Then the Lord said to me, Take a large tablet and write on it in common characters belonging to Maher Shalal-Hashbaz, and have it attested for me by reliable witnesses, the priest Uriah and Zechariah, son of Jeberechiah. And I went to the prophetess, that would be Isaiah's wife, although she could be a prophetess, a female prophet in her own right, but the indication here seems to be just his wife, the wife of a prophet. So, and she conceived and bore a son. Then the Lord said to me, Name him Maher Shalal Hashbaz, for before the child knows how to call my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away by the king of Assyria. Um, we'll stop right there. First off, Maher Shalal Hashbaz means speed to the spoil or fast to the plunder, quick to the plunder. We Isaiah is at this moment he is responding to God has called him to go speak to King Ahaz, who is the king of the southern kingdom of Judah, because King Ahaz has heard that the king of the northern kingdom, Israel, who's King Pekah, has aligned himself with King Rezin of um, of Syria or Aram, what we know as Syria today, but Aram, and they have basically declared war on the southern kingdom. And well, Isaiah has been sent to Ahaz to indicate to him that everything's going to be fine as long as you trust in the Lord. Well, Ahaz didn't really listen to that very much. And Isaiah said, Look, test God, ask God for a sign, and God will give it. Well, Ahaz, in his pride, which remember, God hates pride. Pride is what comes between that puts pride is what puts something ahead of God, and God is the only thing. It should be the only thing. So anyway, Ahaz gets prideful and says, "I'm not going to test God. That would curse me." But he's not saying it as reality. He's saying it as his own proud self. Well, Isaiah then is told that you don't want to test God for a sign. I'm going to give you a sign anyway. A child's going to be born that's going to lead the people into security. And that's all happened in the chapter prior to this. And now here we are in chapter 8, and we hear a message given directly to Isaiah, which seems to kind of imply that this child that's going to be born is going to be his. But it also has a dual prophetic message, meaning that not only will Isaiah have a child and shall name it Maher Shalal Hashbaz, but that's the near prophetic indication. But the far prophetic indication would be the sign of Emmanuel, which would be the coming of God to dwell with the people. So, so it's got a dual prophetic message that's carried with it. Because remember, prophets they kind of look at history or prophecy on a dead on like this, and so they only see the tops of the hills, if you will. They, we living 2 to 3, 4,000 years later have the benefit of seeing everything that happens in between. But prophets only can see these things and often get them mixed up. So, well, not necessarily mixed up, but they see things kind of like overlay, like an overlay map. So, anyway, verse 5. The Lord spoke to me again. Because this people has refused the waters of Shiloah that flow gently and melt in fear before Rezin and the son of Remaliah. That Rezin would be King Rezin of Aram, and son of Remaliah is Pekah of the north. Therefore, the Lord is bringing up against it the mighty floodwaters of the river, the king of Assyria, and all his glory. It will rise above all its channels and overflow all its banks. So, this is a comparison of waters to peoples. We get this image of the waters of Shiloah that flow gently. That would be like a living water for the people of Israel. But instead, they melted fear before Rezin and the son of Remaliah, Rezin and Pekah. So they did not heed Isaiah's words to trust in God. And of course, we'll find out later what happened with all that. But Ahaz, spoiler alert, Ahaz instead seeks protection from Assyria in their quest to protect themselves from Aram and the northern kingdom of Israel. So anyway, this comparison of water, the waters of Shiloah that flow gently, compared to Assyria, which is analogized with the floodwaters of the river, probably the Euphrates, rise above all its channels over the lake. So this flowing gently water of Shiloah compared to these floodwaters of the Euphrates, a little big river kind of comparison there. It will sweep on into Judah as a flood, and pouring over will reach up to the neck, and its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land. Oh, Emmanuel. There's that secondary sign of Emmanuel. God be with us. So God will still be there. And you notice it says that it's going to sweep, Assyria is going to sweep on into Judah as a flood. Now, Assyria, after they do conquer the northern kingdom of Israel, they do move into Judah, but they do not conquer Jerusalem. So they do affect the southern kingdom quite a bit, but not as much as they could have. God stayed the hand. Assyria was meant to judge the northern kingdom of Israel, not the southern kingdom of Judah. So, verse 9, take notice, you peoples, and be dismayed. Listen, all you far countries, gird yourselves and be dismayed. Take counsel together, but it shall be brought to naught. Speak a word, but it will not stand, for God is with us. Um, uh, Basically, he's telling the people of Judah that they're going to sweep in, they're going to be almost up to your necks, but you're going to survive because God is with you. There's that Emmanuel, God with us, in just three, a separation of three verses there. So, verse 11. The Lord spoke thus to me while his hand was strong upon me and warned me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what it fears or be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him you shall regard as holy. Let him be your fear and let him be your dread. So the Lord is telling Isaiah, look, you're a man of the people, but I want you to be in the world, but not of the world. You are not of this people. I have consecrated you. Remember we read last week the touching, or maybe the week before, the touching of the coals to Isaiah's mouth in his vision of the throne. Um, Isaiah has some worldly experience, but he's been called to act for God and to use that worldly experience in helping these people understand who God is, revealing God to them. But God is telling him, "Look, you're. I want you to do that. That's why I called you. But don't let them get into your heads. Don't let their conspiracies become your conspiracies, or your fears become their fears. Trust in me." It seems like Isaiah needs a lot of reassurance from God because he's finding him. Isaiah is dealing with the same destructive process that the rest of the people of Israel are as well. Verse 14, he will become a sanctuary, a stone one strikes against. Sorry, a stone one strikes against. For both houses of Israel, he will become a rock one stumbles over, a trap and a snare for the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble, they shall fall and be broken, they shall be snared and taken. Um, this seems to be an indicator of God explaining Isaiah to himself. Be a sanctuary. You're going to give my word to these people. they're going to hear it, but they're going to ignore it, or they're going to stumble over their lives, as you know, because they're not going to have any kind of justification with what they've done. They're not going to have an argument for you. Everything you tell them, they're going to realize is true, but it would be like them being caught in a lie and Isaiah pointing it out to them and them just stumbling over it, saying, "Ah, well, it's not what it looks like." So that's kind of what's going on here. And many among them shall stumble, they shall fall and be broken, they shall be snared and taken. Read that. Bind up the testimony, seal the teaching among my disciples. We hear that a lot of several of the prophets where God tells them to bind up this word, close it up in a book or something like that. He told Jeremiah that, he told Ezekiel that, he told Daniel that. So that seems to be indicating that he's telling Isaiah to do that too. I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. Um, See, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs and portents in Israel from the Lord of hosts who dwells on Mount Zion. Now, if people say to you, consult the ghosts and the familiar spirits that chirp and mutter, should not a people consult their gods and the dead on behalf of the living for teaching and for instruction? Surely those who speak like this will have no dawn. They will pass through the land greatly distressed and hungry. So um, Isaiah is telling the people that, or God is telling Isaiah to tell the people, don't consult mediums and people who conjure up spirits and things. They're not going to be able to help you. And those will speak will have no dawn. They're dead. Even if it's possible, they're dead. And what life can they bring? What life can someone who's dead bring? Um, and because of that, they're going to still be hungry. They're going to be greatly distressed and hungry because they're not going to receive the information and the food, the acknowledgement that they're looking for through these mediums. Continuing on, when they are hungry, they will be enraged. We call that hangry, and will curse their king and their gods. They will turn their faces upward, or they will look to the earth, but they will see only distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. So the results of them doing this, they're going to look up. They're not going to find God. They're going to look down. They're not going to find God. They're going to be all alone because they wanted to go out on their own and they felt as if they could control it themselves. And this is what's going to happen with them. Chapter 9, verse 1. But there will be no gloom for those who were in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, he will make glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. There is another prophetic an indicator there, Galilee being where Jesus would start his ministry from. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, and now we hear this Messiah passage, this messianic passage here in Isaiah 9. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. You have multiplied exultation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For all the boots of the tramping warriors and all the garments rolled in blood shall be burned as fuel for the fire. For a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Great will be his authority, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time onward and forevermore. So we'll continue on in just a moment, but um, this is it could be both a near and a far, say fairly near and a far prophetic dual prophecy here as we think about the incarnation of God, the Christ child being born. But at the same time, these authority rest on his shoulders. Great will be the authority. There shall be endless peace from the throne of David. Well, we haven't seen that yet, so that appears to indicate the coming kingdom, the second eschaton, the second coming of Christ, is what that seems to indicate. So both the first and second could apply to this. Continuing with verse 7, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. The Lord sent a word against Jacob, and it fell on Israel, and all the people knew it. Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria. But in pride and arrogance of heart, they said, the bricks have fallen, but we build with dressed stones. The sycamores have been cut, but we will put cedars in their place. That pride and arrogance of the north, of Ephraim being the largest tribe, taking up the largest percentage of land there in the north, and Samaria being the capital of the north. I mean, it's obvious who Isaiah is preaching against here through, or the Lord is talking to through Isaiah here. He's talking to the people of the north. So the Lord raised adversaries against them and stirred up their enemies, the Arameans on the east and the Philistines on the west, and they devoured Israel with open mouth. For all this, his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still. So even in their pride, the Arameans from the east, the Philistines from the west, they attacked, they bombarded Israel, but still God's hand was on the people of the northern kingdom. God didn't turn away from them, and they still existed. Verse 13, the people did not turn to him who struck them or seek the Lord of hosts. So the Lord cut off from Israel head and tail. So based on that, God didn't turn away from them, but he cut off the head and tail, palm branch and reed in one day. The Hebrew words are literally translate to branch and rush. So the dry leaves, the plants on dry land versus the plants in the marsh. From driest to wettest, from highest to lowest, however you want to look at it, that's what it means. The Lord cut them off. Elder, and this is what head and tail, branch and rush, palm branch and reed will mean. Elders and dignitaries are the head, and prophets who teach lies are the tail. For those who led this people led them astray, and those who were led by them were left in confusion. That is why the Lord did not have pity on their young people or compassion on their orphans and widows, for everyone was godless and an evildoer, and every mouth spoke folly. For all this, his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still. So God is still angry, but God is still there. God has not turned his back on them. Uh, so even in all this, he gets rid of the evil leaders, both king, as we think of all those, from Rehoboam. I'm sorry, not Rehoboam, from Jeroboam the first all the way to King Pekah right now. God is replacing them, in the hopes that one of them will turn to God. And by the same token, these priests and prophets, these false priests and false prophets that are teaching false things. The priests acting in Dan and in Bethel, they're at the temples that Rehoboam set up, and the prophets that travel amongst them, telling the kings everything they want to hear instead of what they really need to hear. But God is still with them. Verse 18, for wickedness burned like a fire, consuming briars and thorns. It kindled the thickets of the forest, and they swirled upward in a column of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts, the land was burned, and the people became like fuel for the fire. No one spared another. They gorged on the right, but still were hungry, and they devoured on the left, but were not satisfied. They devoured the flesh of their own kindred. Manasseh devoured Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh, and together they were against Judah. For all this, his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still. So God is still passing judgment, but God is still with them. Even though they fought amongst themselves and they attacked their own brothers to the south. Chapter 10, verse 1. Woe to those who make iniquitous decrees, who write oppressive statutes, to turn aside the needy from justice, and to rob the poor of my people of their right, to make widows their spoil, and to plunder orphans. This is one of those types of warnings that you find on the back of hair dryers. Do not use this while in the shower, because it'll cause harm. And that particular warning will bring harm to whoever's reading it. But what I mean by that is this is a curse, if you will, against those because they're already doing these things. Woe to those who make iniquitous decrees. They're already doing that, and they're going to continue to do it. And woe is not a good thing. What will you do on the day of punishment, in the calamity that will come from far away, specifically talking about Assyria? To whom will you flee for help, and where will you leave your wealth? so as not to crouch among the prisoners or fall among the slain. For all this, his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still. So they're going to be attacked by somebody from far away, not just the Arameans to their east and the Philistines to their west, or the Ammonites or the Moabites or any of those. This is going to come from further away, and that's the Assyrians. But God is still with them. Verse 5, woe to Assyria. Now, Assyria is the vessel through which God is enacting judgment. But Assyria, as we're going to find out, is going to get full of themselves, and their pride is going to cause God to judge them. So that's what this is getting at. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger. The club in their hands is my fury. Against a godless nation I send him, and against the people of my wrath I command him to take spoil and seize plunder and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. But this is not what he intends, nor does he have this in mind, but it is in his heart to destroy and to cut off nations, not a few. So God is going to act against Assyria because they're going to act like they're better than God. Verse 8, for he says, are not my commanders all kings? Is not Calno like Carchemish? Is not Hamath like Arpad? Is not Samaria like Damascus? As my hand has reached to the kingdoms of the idols whose images were greater than those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not do to Jerusalem and her idols what I have done to Samaria and her images? I wrote a date on there, 740 to 721 BCE. These things happened during the Assyrian attacks on the northern kingdom, and it was found on a scroll or some type of written element there in Assyrian. So we have an idea of when that was written because of that. So there is archaeological proof that these things happened around that time frame, that 19-year time or 21-year time frame there. 19 years, sorry. Verse 12, when the Lord has finished all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, he will punish the arrogant boasting of the king of Assyria and his haughty pride. Now, keep in mind, Assyria is also going to encroach into Judah. It's not going to destroy Jerusalem, but God is still working through Assyria to enact judgment upon the southern kingdom too, at least partly. For he says, by the strength of my hand I have done it, and by my wisdom, for I have understanding, I have removed the boundaries of peoples, and they have plundered their treasures. Again, talking about the king of Assyria being all prideful. Like a bull, I have brought down those who sat on thrones. My hand has found, like a nest, the wealth of the peoples. And as one gathers eggs that have been forsaken, so I have gathered all the earth. And there was none that moved a wing, or opened its mouth, or chirped. This is the king of Assyria speaking, or what God is saying the king of Assyria is going, how he's going to speak. He's just so full of himself. Now we get back to Isaiah responding to what God is telling him is going to happen. Shall the axe vaunt itself over the one who wields it, or the saw magnify itself against the one who handles it? As if a rod should raise the one who lifts it up, or as if a staff should lift the one who is not wood. Isaiah begins saying, Assyria is just a vessel. How do they, if Assyria is a hammer, how can the hammer be greater than the person that wields the hammer, which is God in this case? That's what he's saying. Verse 16. Therefore, the sovereign, the Lord of hosts, will send wasting sickness among his stout warriors, and under his glory a burning will be kindled like the burning of a fire. The light of Israel will become a fire, and his Holy One a flame, and it will burn and devour his thorns and briars in one day. The glory of his forest and his fruitful land the Lord will destroy, both soul and body. And it will be as when an invalid wastes away. The remnant of the trees of his forest will be so few that a child can write them down. This mainly is speaking to the oppressors of Assyria, which would be the Babylonians. So even Assyria is going to face judgment, and they're going to be treated similar to the way they treated their people, the people that they conquered. Verse 20. On that day, the remnant of Israel and the survivors of the house of Jacob will no longer lean on the one who struck them, but will lean on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob to the mighty God. For though your people, O Israel, were like the sand of the sea, only a remnant of them will return. Destruction is decreed, an overwhelming verdict. For the Lord God of hosts will make a full end, as decreed in all the earth. This seems to be a dual prophetic indication as well, not only of a remnant returning from exile, but also for the destruction of the evil in the world at the end of days. So, verse 24, therefore, thus says the Lord God of hosts, O my people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrians when they beat you with a rod and lift up their staff against you, as the Egyptians did. For in a very little while my indignation will come to an end, and my anger will be directed to their destruction. The Lord of hosts will wield. Okay, so that was what God told Isaiah to tell them. And so my anger, God's anger is only going to last for a short while, and it'll be directed at them, at the Assyrians themselves. And then Isaiah again. The Lord of hosts will wield a whip against them, as when he struck Midian at the rock of Oreb. You can read about that in Judges. Look up Gideon there in Judges. His staff will be over the sea, and he will lift it as he did in Egypt. That's specifically talking about the crossing of the Red Sea. On that day, his burden will be removed from your shoulder, and his yoke will be destroyed from your neck. He has gone up from Samaria. He has come to Aiath. He has passed through Migron. At Michmash, he stores his baggage. They have crossed over the pass. At Geba, they lodge for the night. Ramah trembles. Gibeah of Saul has fled. Cry aloud, O daughter Gallim. Listen, O Elisha. Answer her, O Anathoth. Madmenah is in flight. The inhabitants of Gebim flee for safety. Now, each of these cities that we've just mentioned is the path of destruction that Assyria is going to follow from north to south. So, as they take over the Syrians, the Aramaeans, and they enter into the northern kingdom of Israel, this is the successive battles that are going to be fought, and Assyria is going to take control over each of these cities as they work their way south. Verse 32, this very day he will halt at Nob. He will shake his fist at the mount of daughter Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. Now, remember, Nob is where, when David was fleeing from Saul, David sought refuge there, and he took the sword of Goliath, and then he fled to the Philistines at that point. But uh, Saul sent his troops to Nob to capture David. He had heard David was there. He sent his troops there to capture him. And when he didn't find him, he killed all of the priests that were there at Nob. There was an altar to the Lord there at Nob, and so he killed all the priests, which was bad. So it's just indicative that here is someone who is trying to capture the anointed one of God, halting at Nob. He will shake his fist at the mount of daughter Zion, the hill of Jerusalem, which is an indicator that he will not be able to conquer Jerusalem. He only made it to Nob, but he couldn't conquer the sanctuary of God. Verse 33, look, the sovereign, the Lord of hosts, will lop the boughs with terrifying power. The tallest trees will be cut down, and the lofty will be brought low. He will hack down the thickets of the forest with an axe, and Lebanon with its majestic trees will fall. A shoot. Now we get to some more interesting, familiar verses as we talk about this shoot of Jesse, the line of David here. A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. That's specifically talking about we've shifted forth in time to when when the southern kingdom of Judah has been taken over, and they've been taken away by Babylonians. There will be a stump of Jesse is what remains, and a shoot's going to come out of that. The line of David will continue, is what this is talking about. Verse 2, the Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge for the poor, and decide with equity for the oppressed of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. Now, at the end of verse 2, we well, verse 2, I think it's verse 1 if we go back. Starting in verse 2, we hear about the Spirit of the Lord, and I've got this reference here to Revelation 1:4. There are actually 4 or 5 references to the sevenfold Spirit or the 7 spirits of the 7 churches. A study that I took quite a while, quite a few years back, indicated that that sevenfold Spirit may be what these 7 characteristics of the Spirit are here in Isaiah. And if we go over, there's 7 here as we count the Spirit of the Lord. That's the first one. The Spirit of wisdom, the Spirit of understanding, the Spirit of counsel, the Spirit of might, the Spirit of knowledge, and the Spirit of the fear of the Lord. 7. This almost positively indicates the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ. So, and of course, there at the in verse 5, we get these ideas that Paul reiterates in his writings: the breastplate of righteousness, the you know. Anyway, these the sword of the Spirit, these kinds of things, belt around the waist, belt around the loins, such. Then we get to see kind of a vision, if you will. Isaiah is describing what we believe will be the millennial period, which is after the period of tribulation that's to come, but before the eternal reign of Christ during this 1,000-year millennial period. The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion will feed together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. The reason I say that, we get here in verse 9, the reason I said what I did before about the millennial period, we get an idea here. Here in verse 9, where it says, "For the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord." And if you remember back up here, here in verse 2, the end of verse 2, we get the spirit of knowledge of the Lord, is what I believe it to be there. So we'll be full of the knowledge of the Lord. So the Spirit will be there in that millennial period. Verse 10, "On that day, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious." I'm excited. On that day, the Lord will again raise his hand to recover the remnant that is left of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the coastlands of the sea. We get this beautiful image of God's chosen, the Jews being there in that millennial time frame, recognizing Christ finally as this descendant of David that was to come, the Messiah. I get shaky when I think about it. He will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. The jealousy of Ephraim shall depart. The hostility of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not be jealous of Judah, and Judah shall not be hostile towards Ephraim. But they shall swoop down on the backs of the Philistines in the west. Together they shall plunder the people of the east. They shall put forth their hand against Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites shall obey them. So I think what we're getting here is kind of a mixture of what Isaiah is seeing in these different things. He's seeing part of the millennial period, but he's also seeing their time coming back from exile and such, kind of being mixed together. These images being mixed together. But take it how you will. Verse 15, "And the Lord will dry up the tongue of the sea of Egypt and will wave his hand over the river with its scorching wind and will split it into 7 channels and make a way to cross on foot. So there shall be a highway from Assyria for the remnant that is left of his people, as there was for Israel when they came up from the land of Egypt." Again, Isaiah getting kind of his images mixed up, but talking about the exile here. And then on to chapter 12. And this will be our last chapter here. Verse 1, "You will say on that day," which day? The day that they come back. "I will give thanks to you, O Lord, for though you were angry with me, your anger turned away and you comforted me." What a wonderful sentiment and a wonderful feeling that like God as a parent being angry with us, but after the anger, after the disciplinary period was over, we're comforted by the same one who had to enact the discipline. Verse 2, surely God is my salvation. I will trust and will not be afraid, for the Lord is my strength and my might. He has become my salvation. Boy, that speaks volumes to the Psalms there. With joy, you will draw water from the wells of salvation, and you will say on that day, which day? This, I believe, could be that millennial period. During that millennial period, we're drawing water from the wells of salvation. It may even be the eternal kingdom, but it seems to indicate that it's a different day than the one that we just read about, talking about specifically about the exile. On you, and you will say on that day, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his deeds among the nations, proclaim that his name is exalted, sing praises to the Lord, for he has done gloriously. Let this be known in all the earth. Shout aloud and sing for joy, O royal Zion, for great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. This could be another dual prophecy indicating Jesus coming in, being born, but specifically coming into the city of Jerusalem the week before he was crucified. The Hosanna, glory to God in the highest. Or it could be, as I believe, it could be that eternal kingdom as we realize that eternity has come. We're in the presence of God, and we're going to be singing praises. This is the call to worship, the final call to worship before we start the eternity time frame. So next time we meet, which will be in a few weeks, we're going to take a couple of weeks off. So the next time we'll have this will be on August 13th. But we're going to talk about an oracle concerning Damascus. That would be Syria or Aram. And then Aram and Israel defeat Judah. Remember, those two kingdoms had joined together to fight against Israel, or the southern kingdom of Judah. And so we're finally going to get the results of that. Spoiler alert: they defeat Judah. And then there's the intervention of Oded. Oded is another prophet that we're going to hear about briefly. Assyria refuses to help Judah. We again, another spoiler alert: Judah, instead of looking to the Lord like Isaiah entreated Ahaz to do, Ahaz instead seeks assistance from Assyria to protect them from Aram and Israel. And instead, they refuse to help, and more problems arise from that. So we hear about the apostasy and death of Ahaz. Ahaz basically tries to he sets up um, uh, false idols there in the temple, even moves the bronze table that he set up for him to give his own personal um, sacrifices to God. He moves it to the side to make way for a altar that he saw in Assyria. So anyway, that's the apostasy, and then he dies. So Hoshea reigns over Israel. So Pekah obviously is going to die, and Hoshea is going to become king on Israel, the northern kingdom. Hezekiah's reign over Judah. So we heard about the death of Ahaz. Here we're going to hear about his son Hezekiah reigning over Judah. And good news, guys. Even though Ahaz was bad, Hezekiah is going to be very, very good, which is very nice. And then we hear about the family of Hosea. So that should be another indication to you that we're going into yet another prophet. We've got Isaiah prophesying, we've got Micah prophesying, we're going to get Hosea prophesying all around this same time frame. And Hosea is going to prophesy about the restoration of Israel, both in again in a dual prophetic manner, both after exile and also at the end times. So look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. God bless.